Welcome to the Purpose and Purity Podcast. I'm your host, Titania, and I'm here to help you maximize your impact in life through embracing biblical womanhood. Every Tuesday, you'll get actionable and biblical insights on how to overcome sexual strongholds, cultivate an intimate relationship with God, and live out your unique purpose as a disciple maker and girl boss. After the show, the conversation continues in our Purpose and Purity Facebook group. I can't wait to see you there. Welcome to the first episode of the Purpose and Purity Podcast, Overcoming Sexual Sin, a proven framework for the Christian woman battling lust. In the first half of today's show, I'll be sharing how I came to trust God with my soul and my sexuality, and how that decision has completely transformed my life. In the last half, I'll share some actionable steps you can apply to your own journey. I've been walking in sexual purity for over 7 years now, free from pornography, masturbation, ungodly relationships, and same-sex attraction. And I want to share with you the exact framework God used to transform my life so that you can experience God's grace and redemption in a way you never imagined. So stick around to hear my testimony and learn this proven 4-step framework to embracing sexual purity. But first, let me say sexual purity, or really sexual impurity, isn't an easy thing to talk about. Believe me, sis, I understand. As you listen to this podcast, I'll reveal some of my stories so that you know that I'm not pointing fingers of judgment, but only the parts that God has shown me will be helpful to my listeners. Lust and I go way back. It started with cable TV and then the internet. Porn made a swift invasion in my innocent mind at a young age. By the time I hit the 10th grade, I had a growing curiosity towards sex and a desire to replicate the images I saw. Watching porn may have initiated my battle with lust, but my sexual struggles were certainly not limited to porn. Porn became a gateway, introducing to me several new sexual struggles, including attraction toward women. Raised in a single-parent home without the affection of my father, sensuality and romance appealed to me. Even though I grew up in church and had an affinity for God, engaging in lust became my quick fix, a remedy to silence the fears that I was unloved, unwanted, and unseen. The little bit of faith I possessed was tested harshly in my junior year of college. Since I considered myself a religious person, I began attending a college ministry called The Gathering. Through spending time with several friends on a regular basis, I started noticing some severe gaps in my so-called faith in God. The women I befriended through the ministry strive to live for God 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. This was a night and day contrast to the devotion I had witnessed growing up. These women were serious about pleasing God. When I considered how superficial my own devotion to God was, I knew I hadn't really given my life to Christ. But I decided that would change. Excited about this epiphany, I invited my boyfriend at the time to join me in my quest to live for Christ, for real. And he politely declined. Suddenly, I found myself in a dilemma. I could start this relationship with God, but it'd be at the expense of my relationship with my boyfriend, my first, the one with whom I threw caution to the wind and lost my virginity to, that boyfriend. I wish I could say I chose Jesus, but I didn't. Long story short, God disbanded our little romance. After months of drowning in depression and teetering on the edge of insanity, I reluctantly accepted the fact that we were never, ever, ever getting back together. The pain felt like a finishing blow, validating all of my fears. I am unloved. I am unwanted. I am unseen. At that moment, God spoke to my heart with tender opposition. I was loved, I was wanted, and I was seen by Him. From that moment forward, I trusted God with my soul and my sexuality. My life has never been the same since. After giving God total authority over my life, He began walking with me through this process of redemption. I want you to experience the same transformation and wholeness I have, so I'll share this 4-step framework to embracing sexual purity with you. Now remember, this is a framework, not a formula. We serve a personal God, and He'll work with us personally. Step 1. Embrace the purity mindset. God transformed my soul, and my mind needed to match this miraculous makeover. During this time, God taught me that biblical purity is pleasing God by seeking to live righteously. Sexual purity is just one piece of the bigger picture of living a pure life. I spent a lot of time learning more about God, what it means to be a Christ follower, and disconnecting from anything or anyone that would distract me. I stopped consuming sexualized content, including songs, movies, and video games. I let go of toxic relationships, pressed pause on others, and instead gravitated to my support system, my loved ones, and my church family that supported me and held me accountable to God's word. Step 2, find purpose in purity. Instead of focusing on a long list of sexual purity don'ts, I committed to pursuing God. And because of that, He began to reveal more of my identity to me and revive old passions I was too distracted by lust to pursue. In my childhood, I had an interest in ministry and was a Japan fanatic. After serving for some time in my church, I was invited to become an intern and later served as a missionary in Japan for 2 years. I originally feared that living for God would be boring, but God showed me that when I pursue Him, that I gain clarity about who I am and maximize my impact in His kingdom. Step 3, live the purity lifestyle. I'm not a robot. Even though God gave me the desire to live for Him, there were many changes in my life I had to make for myself. During this phase of the framework, I identified and eliminated negative behaviors that caused me to take steps backward in my journey. Most of this was done by studying God's Word and examining myself against the Scriptures. 2 destructive patterns that I noticed was my habit of dressing immodestly and acting flirtatious. I replaced these negative habits with actions that affirm my goal of living pure. In the case of my immodest dress and behavior, I learned how to dress fashionably without drawing attention to my body and carry myself in a way that brought attention to God. By removing and forming new habits, I created biblical routines, which were the bedrock of my purity lifestyle. Step 4, sustain the purity lifestyle. There are many hills and valleys in the journey to embracing sexual purity, and it's only wise that we prepare for both. This preparation is key to persevering in purity. After experiencing a severe betrayal in my church while serving overseas, my missionary service came to an end, and without much to my name, no car, money, or even my own clothes, I was forced to move in with my parents. The transition was difficult. Cut off from my original support system and trying to shake off my feelings of extreme loneliness, and the temptation to double back into my past ways was overwhelming. In my desperation, I cried out to God and repented for ways I had already begun to compromise. Even though things seemed bleak, I decided to visit a church a mentor had recommended to me, to find a new support system and to continue to trust in God. It was there that I met my husband, Gerald. That first Sunday I visited the church. The entire situation went from being this terrible experience that threatened my faith to becoming this vehicle that God used to bless me and meet my needs. Perseverance is worth it, and it's possible because we serve a faithful God. This framework has continued to help me sustain a pure lifestyle, even as a married woman. After all, marriage isn't some protective barrier against sexual temptation, but that's another blog post for another day. The most encouraging thing about this story, my story, is that I'm not special. God can and He's willing to do the same for you. You don't have to fix yourself before you come to God. You can give Him your heart and He'll do the rest. If you'd like to go deeper into this framework for overcoming sexual sin, sign up for my free Purpose and Purity Roadmap video training and checklist. You can find it on my site at titaniapage.com/roadmap. All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Purpose and Purity podcast with me, Titania Page. If you like this podcast, please show your support by leaving a review on iTunes. It helps spread the word so other women can find the show. You can also catch me on TitaniaPage.com, YouTube, and Instagram at Titania Page, where I have even more content for the passionate Christian woman. Love you all so much. Bye.